Hello everyone, this is Derek with another video game My Thoughts review video. Today I am talking about Enslaved, Odyssey to the West. This one I have here is for PlayStation 3. It's also available on the Xbox 360. This is an action-adventure game, somewhat in the style of Uncharted or Tomb Raider, in as much as you're climbing all over everything. So it's one of these action-adventure games where you're jumping from this to that and traversing the world by climbing all over everything. I don't know if there's really a specific subgenre that's called. I like that kind of game quite a bit. I think jumping around and climbing over everything is a lot of fun. This game is based on the old Chinese novel Journey to the West, which has been adapted into a ton of different things. There are books and comic books. There's an opera, probably more than one opera based on it. There's just tons of stuff that this has inspired. I've never actually gone back and read the original book, so I don't know how closely this fits it. But this is it's at least definitely inspired by that story. But whereas that one took place in ancient China, this is a post-apocalyptic story. So this takes place in some sort of future date where there has been apparently sort of a war between mechs and humans that has completely ravaged the world. One of the things I like about the game is that it doesn't really go into too much explanation about what actually happened in the past. Because I like that, because it could have gotten bogged down with really needless exposition, because what you're dealing with in the game and the way the characters live, this is something that has taken place like hundreds of years ago. It's not like The Last of Us where it happened in these people's lifetimes. This is something that happened hundreds of years ago. They don't know anything other than this world. So it doesn't really matter what that conflict was about. And having spent time with exposition, spelling that out, I think would have just been a waste of time and slowed things down. So I love the fact that they didn't mess with it. They're just like, okay, here's the world, go. Which is really nice. And so you start off, you are actually on a slave ship being captured by some of the remainder mechs that are in the world. And you are on this ship. Well, the ship crashes. So beginning level starts off with you're just getting out of the ship. And you make it out of the ship, but you fall unconscious. When you wake up, you have a slave headband on you. And one of the other humans that had gotten captured put this on you while you were sleeping. Basically, it forces you to do everything that person says. The reason that she does this is because she wants you to help her get home, and she didn't know how to convince you otherwise. She needs your help because she needs some muscle to back her up. So this is what she does. And that basically starts off the story, and the whole story is about what happens from that point on. I really had a good time with the game. The game was a lot of fun. It was something that I sort of just barreled through in a weekend, which was great. It was kind of it was exactly the kind of game I needed at the time, which was, I've been playing a ton of heavy RPGs and stuff, so it was nice to play something a little more action-y, and also something a little shorter. So it was nice. It was really a great experience. So let's talk a little bit about the gameplay itself. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of jumping around, climbing trees, and doing all this stuff and things. The one thing that's a little bit, it doesn't have the same sort of exploratory quality that something like a Tomb Raider, the recent reboot, does, where you have this big world to explore. It's not really open world or open even in the levels, where it's pretty linear. It's a pretty straightforward linear game, but there still is some puzzle solving to be done with how you traverse things and all that stuff. One of the things about the traversal that could be an issue for some people is that anything that you can hold on to sort of glows a little bit or has a shine to it, which I actually don't mind. I know some people probably will have an adverse reaction to that, feeling like it just seems too out of place or it kills the immersion or whatever they want to say. But I actually feel like it's a better trade-off to do that than to make it difficult. Because there are times in like Uncharted or something where I can't tell what it is I can climb up and onto or not. And I may be, running up against a wall and sort of jumping in place, trying to see, okay, can I get up here? Can I get up here? That kind of thing. And so I feel like, to me, if it was something, I prefer that as opposed to I prefer it to be shiny or really spelled out as opposed to it being a pain in the butt or confusing. And it's still just as fun to try to navigate the area. So but that is something that could be a problem for some people. like I mentioned in the beginning of the game, you are the slave essentially of this person, this character that's with you. And one of the things that had made me a little bit wary of this game in the beginning, or when I first heard about it, was that I found out that if this other character dies, you die. And I was like, oh gosh, this is just going to be one huge long escort quest. And it kind of is, but one of the things I loved about the game is that even though you are tasked with the responsibility of keeping her alive, she actually stays out of harm's way for the most part. There are a couple places where she doesn't, but a lot of times she just will go off and hide somewhere and say, okay, you go do this, and she never gets anywhere close to any of the danger, which is great. So it never got frustrating, it was never annoying, and she was fine. There are a couple of places where the gameplay kind of shifts to where you're trying to protect her, and that's actually probably some of the times when I thought the game was weakest, because a lot of times it was a turret sort of section. So you would kill a robot, you take over his gun, and then she's down here, you're sort of up on this high place, all these mechs are coming after her, and you're shooting them off and trying to keep them off her. It kind of reminds me of a lot of sections. Uncharted has had some sections like this. I know the Uncharted game on the Vita has that, where you've got all these people coming around and you've got a sniper rifle and you're trying to protect someone. And I never like those sections. In Uncharted, I don't like them in this. Having said that, though, luckily, for the most part, they aren't all that long, which is nice. That's one thing I felt like the game did really well, is that it kept those kinds of sections, it broke up what you were doing by adding those, but they never got too long. They never got to where it was really frustrating or really long. So that was nice. There are some other sections in the game that were also a little frustrating as far as where it almost kind of reminded me of the speeder bike section of Battletoads, where you are flying down something. You have this thing called a cloud, which is sort of this floaty disc that you run around on, which is really a lot of fun to play with. But you're chasing down something. Usually it's a mech that's gotten a hold of the girl. You're chasing them down, and you are trying to catch them. So in one respect, one of the things I have issue with that, and this applies to the turret sections too, is I understand why games will change up the gameplay sometimes to kind of mix things up. But a lot of times I get frustrated with that because I feel like, okay, the whole time in this game I have been working on and learning these combat techniques that you've taught me, and the game is primarily melee combat. But now all of a sudden I have to be a shooter. Now it's become a first-person shooter of sorts. Or now it's what is a racing game, basically. You're running down this thing, you're dodging in and out of stuff trying to catch this girl. So now it's a racing game. So there are all these sections where I may be great at melee combat and running around jumping, but I'm not a good shooter, and that's going to keep me from progressing in the game. It's a little pet peeve of mine. A lot of games do this, where they will have a section that's completely different in gameplay style to mix things up, but it frustrates me because if I'm playing a game because I like third-person action-adventure melee combat, I may not be a gamer that likes shooting at all. So now I've got to get through this shooting section in order to progress the story, and I don't like that. But that's not unique to this game. A lot of games do that. And again, I understand why they do it in order to mix things up, but it still can be frustrating. And those are the parts of this game that I liked the least, were those sections. But again, luckily they're not that long, and I think the game recognizes that that's not something necessarily that you would want to play. Having chosen to play this game, you may not want to play a racing game. So the racing sort of sections are very short, which is really, really good. So it seems like they're cognizant of that and are thinking about that. So those are basically my criticisms, I would say, of the game. You know, the turret sections, the racing sections are kind of frustrating. The shiny thing could be problematic. Again, I figure it's worth the trade-off, but you may not agree with me on that. But apart from that, that's really the only criticism I have of this game. I mean, it's actually a really fantastic action-adventure game. It's got the main character, Monkey, named that way because that's the main character of the Journey to the West novel, is played by Andy Serkis of Gollum and Planet of the Apes fame. So it's really done well. I mean, and the thing is, the motion capture in this game is really fantastic. Especially the faces. That's the thing I was so very surprised about. Some of the facial expressions in this game. I'm trying to remember what year this came out. Because it's not a super new game. No, it's 2010. So actually it's older than I thought it was. And the facial capture in that was really good. There were a lot of things you could see wheels turning when someone would say something or look at someone a certain way. Especially in Monkey's character, where you would see some stuff happening, some acting. You'd see that come through, and I was just really surprised at how good that was for the time that this game was made. Because it's a little bit older. I mean, you see stuff like that in The Last of Us, but that's a very recent game, and it's not as good as the stuff in Last of Us. But again, it's a few years older than that. So it's really the graphics are exceptional. It is a gorgeous game, and not just the mocap. The one thing I love about this game, it's a post-apocalyptic game, but again, because it's set a few hundred years after the apocalypse, nature has begun to take over. And so you are going through, in the beginning of the game, you're going through New York City, but it's a New York City that is covered in green, that's covered in plants and ivy, and all the buildings have gotten overgrown with nature. And so the game is beautiful. It's gorgeous, bright, and colorful. It does not have that gray or brown sort of post-apocalyptic, the Fallout 3 kind of post-apocalyptic thing that we think of. Not that those games are necessarily bad for having that, because that certainly fits a certain style, but it's just so nice to see a game that's post-apocalyptic, but that is bright and colorful and lush and vibrant. I loved the way that this game looks. It is absolutely beautiful. The characters are actually really great as well. There is a really interesting relationship between Monkey and his captor. There were a lot of things I expected the game story to go off into the sort of predictable romantic tropes or something like those things. And even though there may be little hints of it, it's all very subtle. The game has a lot of subtlety in the way that it's presented, whether it's in the facial expressions and the way you can see the wheels turning in someone's mind, or just the way that the story plays out and the way that the characters interact. It's very subtle. It's smartly written. It's written very well. It's a good story. It's got an interesting twist at the end. Some people may or may not like that. Depends on how you feel about those kinds of things. But it's still really, really cool, really satisfying, and really I don't want any spoilers here. So, but it's definitely one of those endings that kind of makes you think. It makes you think a little bit, and I really enjoy that. I appreciate that. It doesn't dumb anything down just because it's a running, jumping, climbing trees action game. It still has some smart ideas and thoughts to it. So I don't have a whole lot else to say about the game. It's a fantastic game, and it's super cheap. I mean, you can get this thing at GameStop used for no under $10, maybe even around $5. I can't remember. I think I paid maybe like $8.99 for it. It was a steal. It is a really, really good time, and I definitely recommend checking this game out. If you like anything like the Uncharted games, or kind of maybe even God of War, because of the combat, the melee combat, it's not as complex as God of War's combat, but you still will power up your character, level up his different abilities and things. It's got some shooting elements to it, as far as you have the staff that shoots things out, but it doesn't ever go into full-blown shooter territory except for the turret sections. But it's just got some great variety. It's a really fun game, and I really, really had a good time with it, and definitely recommend it. All right, well, thank you so much, as always, for watching.